when we look at line equations, we can find the slope. When we compare line equations, they can either be parallel, perpendicular, or neither. And parallel lines, they have the same slope. Yep, and we're still in 3-3. And this is the last part of 3-3. 3-4 is a short section also. So parallel lines, they have the same slope. So these lines would be parallel. Y equals 5x plus 2, and y equals 5x minus 12. These lines would be parallel because look at the number in front of the x. These numbers are the same, all right? And if they are the same, they are parallel. So parallel lines, they have the same slope, the same value when you solve for y. Perpendicular lines, they have what are called negative reciprocal slopes or opposite reciprocal slopes. Bless you.
Thank you.
And these lines are perpendicular. Y equals, how about 2/3 x plus 4, and y equals minus 3/2 x minus 12. These would be perpendicular because when we look at the slopes and compare them, we're going to notice that they are different signs, right? One is positive, one is negative, and they're also flipped over. So this top one, its slope is a positive 2/3, right? And the bottom one, what is its slope? Negative 3/2. Now, when I mean opposite, what does opposite mean? Different signs. Okay, so one of these has to be positive, the other one has to be negative. And what do I mean by reciprocal? Reciprocal means I flipped it over. Okay, so if I flip this over, what does it become? 3/2, right? If I flip this over, this fraction here, it becomes 3/2. Now, this one is positive, so the other one needs to be what? Negative. So they're flipped over, they're inverted, and one is positive, one is negative. So now I'm going to give you two lines, and you're going to tell me if these are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. And you may have to solve for y. Okay, so parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Well, how do I compare them? What I need to do is I'm comparing the slopes. So that means each one of these I need to do what? I need to solve it for y independently. There's two of them. There's two equations, one, and there's two. Now, I need to take each equation, I need to solve it for y, and then I need to see what value is in front of that x. I cannot compare them the way that they are. I have to take each one, and I have to solve it for y. So this is what you're given. Let's take our first equation. These are pretty simple to work through. 5x plus y equals 7. How would I solve this one for y? What would I do? I would take the 5x off, right? And that is going to then leave you with y equals now a minus 5x plus 7. So what is your slope here? Minus 5. Now we take the second equation and we do the exact same approach. We take it and we solve the second one for y. So 10x plus 2y equals 1. We're going to move the 10x over. And now we've got 2y equals a minus 10x plus 1. Right? Let me move this up so we can see what we've got here. And how do we finish it? We divide it by 2. And now what does that give you? That gives you y equals, now when you reduce, a minus 5x plus what? Plus a half. So what would the slope of this line be? We want the number in front of the x, and what's the number in front of the x? Negative 5. Now, what do you notice about these slopes? Yeah, these are the same. If the slopes are the same, what are these lines? These lines are parallel. So if they come out to be the same numbers, they are going to be parallel. Okay? So you have to take each one and you solve them independently. And if they come out to have the same number, then they are parallel. If they're completely different numbers, they would be neither. And if they are just reciprocals of each other and opposites, then they would be what? Then they would be perpendicular. Okay? So let's try another set. Are these lines again going to be parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Are these lines going to be parallel, perpendicular, or neither? And we've got our two lines here, right? And we need to take each one of these and we need to solve it for y. So let's take our first one, which is 4x plus y equals 9. We're going to move that 4x over. And that leaves you now with y equals what? Y equals a minus 4x plus 9. And so what would the slope here be? Negative 4. That's the number in front of the x. Remember, this number represents your slope. Okay. Now, what about the second equation? We repeat the process for the second equation. And we see what we've got. So we've got 7x plus 2y equals that 14. So we're going to move that 7x over, just like we did here. So we'll move that 7x over. And that leaves you now with 2y equals a minus 7x plus 14. And what's my next step? Divide by 2. And then we see what we've got. We need to reduce it down if possible. And so this is going to reduce down to be y equals a minus 7 halves x. And 14 over 2, well, that makes it a what? 7. So what is my slope? Negative 7 halves. Now, compare them. Okay, you want to compare these two. Neither. They are completely different, right? They are not just reciprocals. They are completely different, so that means that these would be neither. I'm going to try to do one of each type. And all you do on these is you just solve it for y. That is it. Okay. So let's do one more. And then we'll start the next section. We'll start 3-4. We may not get through all of 3-4, but we'll get through a good portion of it. That way we don't have much to do after fall break. That way we can focus more on our final. So let's look at one more. And again, are these lines going to be parallel, perpendicular, or neither? And let's say we have 8x plus 2y equals 5. That's going to be our first one. And then what about we have, minus, minus 3x plus, how about 12y equals 14. So we're going to compare these, and we're going to, again, see if these are parallel, if they are perpendicular, or if they are neither. And what do we always do? Solve it for y. That's what we do. In this section, we're not solving for x. We're going to be solving for y, because we use that to be able to graph lines, find our slope, and that's how we write our equations, is we solve it for y. So we take our first equation, so we've got two of them, 1 and 2. And we're going to take our first equation, which is 8x plus 2y equals 5, and we're going to solve this for y. So we move the 8x over, and that leaves you with 2y equals now a minus 8x plus 5, and we divide it all by 2, and we now end up with y equals a minus 4x plus 5 halves, and we now know that my m should be what? Negative 4, isn't it? Okay, so there's my m there. Now remember, what are perpendicular lines? Perpendicular lines, well, they have a negative reciprocals or opposite reciprocal slope. So switch the signs, flip the fraction over. And if they do that, then they're perpendicular. So let's take the next one. So the next one is minus 3x plus 12y equals 14. So we're going to move that 3x over with addition because it's subtraction. So move it over with addition. And now we've got 12y equals now 3x plus 14. We're going to divide everything by that 12, and we've got to reduce. So divide it all by 12. And we need to make sure we reduce as much as possible. You have to reduce. So this comes out to be y equals. Now, 3 over 12, that reduces down to be 1/4, doesn't it? And how about 14 over 12? Well, that reduces down to be 7/6. What would my slope be? 1/4. Okay, so let's look at our slopes and compare them. First, what do you notice about the signs? Are they different? Yes. Are they flipped over? If you take 4 and it's over 1, right? 4 over 1. If you take 4 over 1 and you flip it over, what do you get? 1/4. So they are negative or they are opposite reciprocals. So they are perpendicular. Okay, so those would be perpendicular there. Is everyone okay with that? Now, we may or may not have time to finish up 3-4, but we'll do a lot of it. We may not have time to work with the equations and find them, but we're going to take some time now to be graphing equations. when you're given just the equation, no points. Okay, so let's learn now how to graph these. So I'm going to give you an equation. I'm going to have you find the slope, find the y-intercept, and graph. And this is 3, 4. And we'll start off with an easy one. Okay. Now in 3, 3, we just did this. In 3, 3, remember, we found the slope. Okay. Now we're going to add a little bit to this. So we're going to find the slope. We're also going to find the y-intercept. And then we're also going to graph it. So we're taking what we've already learned, and we're just adding 1 or 2 more steps. Now, first off, to find the slope, it has to be solved for y. So this is already solved for y. And we just did this a moment ago. So the number in front of the x, that is your slope. So in this case, my slope would be what? Minus 3/2, right? Now, we talked about the y part here on the end, the b part, when we solved it for y, and that was your y-intercept. I didn't have you find it, but I'm going to have you find it now. And we write that as an ordered pair, and that would be 0, comma, -5. Is everyone okay with that? So the number on the end is your y-intercept, and you write it as an ordered pair. Now, we learned how to graph earlier today. We learned how to graph a line when you're given a point and you're given a slope. So we can graph this because we've got a point and we've got our slope. Now, the y-intercept, that's going to be our starting point. So where am I going to start at? 0, 5, -5, so that's going to be down 5 units. The y-intercept is how far up or down you go. So you're going to start down 5 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there is my first point at 0, -5. Now, what is my slope? My slope is -3 over what? 2. So what are we going to have to do? Down 3 over 2. So we're right here at -5. So we're going to have to go down 3. So 1, 2, 3. So that's going to put it at -8. And then we're going to have to go over 2 units. So we're going to have to go down down 3 over 2 units. So this would be my new point. All right, and that would be at 2, comma what? -8, because we had to take it to -5. We went down 3 more units, so that made it -8, and then we went over 2. Now, can we graph it? Yes, because what do we need to graph a line? 2 different points. So we can now connect these together. Make our line. So let's go ahead and connect these together and make our line. And that's all we have to do. We just add 1 or 2 more steps to what we've already done. A lot of this is not difficult. It's just understanding the basic concepts. So let's do another one. Let's find the slope. Y-intercept and graph. So let's look at this one. And I picked this one on purpose just to make sure we understand what happens if there's no number on the end. So the first thing we need to do is we've got an equation, And what do we always do? Make sure that it is solved for the variable what? The variable y, right? So we always do. So we take our equation and we solve it for that variable y. So let's move that 4x over to solve it for y. And now what do? We divide by our what? -6. And make sure that you reduce. You have to reduce as much as possible. So now that gives you y equals negative and negative makes it a positive. And 4 over 6, well, that reduces down to be 2 what? Thirds. So there's no number on the end. If there's no number on the end, it is like having a plus 0. Okay, it's not there, but we know it is. There's no number on there, so it's like having a plus 0. So what is my slope? 2/3. What is my y-intercept as an ordered pair? It would be 0 what? 0, 0, wouldn't it? So how would I now graph this line? Well, where am I going to start at? What's my point? What's my starting point? 0, 0 at the origin. So that's where they cross right here. And what is my slope? My slope is 2/3. So it's positive. So what does that mean? We go up 2 and we go over what? 3. So we're going to start here at 0, 0. So we're going to go up 2. And then we're going to go over 1, 2, 3. So up 2 and over 3. And that makes my second point right here at, if you want to label it, you can. Looks like it's going to be at 3, 2. And we can connect these together. And there's our line. So simple enough there. We just connect them together. Okay. So that's all you need to do on that. Let's look at another one. Now, in some cases, you may have an f of x instead of a y. They're the same thing. So again, we're going to find the slope, y-intercept, and we're going to graph. And we're going to use f of x equals minus, how about 1/3 x plus 2. Now, f of x is the same as y. And you'll learn more about function notation in your next course. In intermediate algebra, you'll talk a little bit about function notation and more in college algebra. But f of x can be used in exchange for y, so they're the same. So it's already basically been solved for y because f of x is y. And what would my slope be? Okay, it's been solved for y already. So the number in front is my slope. So my slope would be minus 1/3. And what would your y-intercept be? As an ordered pair, what would your y-intercept be? Can someone tell me? I'll give you a hint. It's going to be 0, what? 2. Because it's always 0 in front. And the value here, the b, that is your y-intercept. So in this case, it's going to be 0, 2. Now, we can finish it. And how would we graph this? We find our point, 0, 2. So that's at 0 and up 2. And what are we going to do? My slope is minus 1 over 3. So we go down 1 and we go over what? 3. So we're at 2 now. So we're going to go down 1. So that makes it at 1. And then we're going to go over 1, 2, 3 units. So what would my new point be? My new point would be if I label it, it's going to be at 3 comma what? 1, right? I always like to label it. You don't have to. You can just draw the arrows and put your dot, but I like to label it. So it would be at the point 3, 1. Connect them together, and there is my graph. So we just connect them together, and that makes your graph there. So that's that. We've talked about these a little bit, but what happens if we only have either an x value or if we only have a y value? So let's say I just give you one where all you have is an x. So we're going to find the slope, the intercepts if we have them, and graph. So let's say I just give you this. So let's say all we have is y equals 5. There's no x part, right? Okay, so how do I look at this one? Well, this one I don't have to do any calculations on. It's just a matter of understanding the concept. So this is a y line, and that means it crosses the y-axis at what number? 5. So I'm going to start on my y-axis, and I'm going to go up 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So right there it is. And that is going to be at 0, 5. Now, if it is a y line, is it vertical or is it horizontal? It's going to be horizontal, right? Because look at your dot. It wouldn't make sense to go up and down, would it? Always look at and see if it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to go that way. It makes more sense to go what? That way. So this is your y line. And so y lines, remember, are horizontal. Now let's answer the question. So we've got it graphed. We did that first because it's a little bit different because it's a horizontal line. It's a y line. Y lines are horizontal. X lines are vertical. What is the slope of this line going to be? Is it 0 or is it undefined? Which one? 0. So in this case, my slope would be 0 because it's horizontal. What would my y-intercept be? Okay, it's going to be at ordered pair. It's not just 5. It's going to be at 0, comma what? 5. And do we even have an x-intercept? No. So it has no x-intercept there. Is everyone okay with that? So we see how those work. That's it. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so because I want you to find the slope, the intercepts, and I want you to graph it. Well, we graphed it because it's a y line, right? So it's horizontal. That makes sense there. Once I got my picture, I can look at it, and I said, okay, it's a horizontal line. So horizontal lines have a slope of 0. So that answers the slope part. And then my y-intercept is right there. That's where it crosses the y-axis. So that's at 0, 5. And then we don't have an x-intercept because it never crosses the x-axis. So that's what I want. I want the slope on this one, the y-intercept, and just tell me it doesn't have an x-intercept. Now I'm going to give you a picture, and we're going to use this picture to work backwards and get our equation. So let's find now the equation. I'm going to give you a picture, and I'll make sure it looks similar to what they give you in the homework. Okay, so they give you a pretty easy picture here. Okay, let's say 4, 2 here. So it's a little bit different than the one in your homework, but it's very, very similar. So I'm going to give you a line. Okay, and we're going to find the equation. So here's my line, and I want you to find the equation. So I want you to find y equals mx plus b. So there's my slope. And b is the y-intercept. And that's 0, comma b. So let's begin. We've got to find the slope, and we've got to find the y-intercept. So let's start by finding our y-intercept. And what would our y-intercept be as an ordered pair? Can someone tell me? What would it be as an ordered pair? Okay. Yep. In this case, 0, 4. So that's my b. That 4 is going to be the b. Now we still have to find the slope. Okay, so how do we find the slope? Well, the slope is defined as rise over what? Run. Sure, yep. Okay, so let me go ahead and mark these. We're going to go from one point from this x to the other x. Okay, how do I do that? What am I going to do? I'm starting here, and I've got to go down how many units? If I go from one x to the other, I've got to go down what? 4. So that's going to be a negative 4 there. And then what do I have to do to get to the other x? Over how many units here? Over what? Over 2. So my rise is a minus 4. My run is over 2. So that makes my slope now a minus what? 2. I can now complete my equation because this is my m. So what would my equation look like? It's going to look like y equals, we found our m to be a minus 2. So we put a minus 2x there. And what was our b, our y-intercept? 4. So there's your equation. Let's do one more, and then we'll see how much time we have left if we want to do any others. Which I think we'll just save some of these for the next class. Because they all go together with 3, 5. So let's do one more. Again, I'm going to give you a picture. You're going to have to find the equation. So I'm going to give you a graph again. And let's say this is up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's going to be over 3 on the left. Right, so this is going to be our equation here. Our line here, and we need to find our equation. So here's our line. We're going to find the equation. So again, what do I need to find? I need to find my y-intercept and my slope. And we need to put it in this form. Y equals mx plus the b. This right here is where we cross the y-axis. So this is the y-intercept. And this is going to be at 0, comma what? 7. Is everyone okay with that? Pretty simple there. Okay. Now, how do I find the slope? What do I need to do to find the slope? I've got to go from one point, from this x, to the other one. And by the way, this is going to be 3 here. How would I go from one x to the other? Okay, I've got to go down how many units here? down 7, and then I've got to go over what? 3. So what would my slope be? My slope would be minus 7/3. And what would this look like as a line equation? Well, it would look like y equals minus 7/3 x, and then what number is going to go on the end? That's the 7, because that's my b there. What about one more of these? Let's say I give you a vertical line. Let's try to find the equation. A little bit different for these, but we've got a little bit of time to discuss this. And let's say I've got a vertical line here.
Is there any number that realistically couldn't make like a number for us to plot?
You mean like, okay, so to find the slope, are you trying to, okay, the b is always going to be where it crosses this intercept here. Okay, and in this case, it crosses at 7. So that's my b. Now, how do I get from one point to the other? Well, I go down, and then I go what? Over. So I went down 7, so that's why it's a minus 7, right? Oh, I did it wrong. My mistake. Okay, so I went, I should have been more careful when I wasn't thinking. So my slope should be positive. Why should it be positive? Okay, if we look at it, this line should be going what? Up. And it was my mistake for not thinking there for a moment. But we went down 7, and then we went over, we went back 3 units. So it should be minus 7 over minus 3, which would make that 7/3. And that was my mistake, so it should be a positive 7/3. You can always double check yourself too. And I wasn't careful, but I can look and I can tell that I was wrong in the beginning. Why? How do I know I was wrong? Well, again, what should this slope be? Positive or negative? If I look at my line, what is it doing? As I go from left to right, it's going what? Up, isn't it? So my slope should be positive. And when I did this, I wasn't careful, and I said it was negative. And I can always double check myself by looking at the picture. And that picture goes up, so my slope had better be positive. Now, what did we do? We went down 7, and then we didn't go forward. We went what? Back 3. And that gave me a negative 7 over negative 3. Negative over negative made it a what? Positive. So sorry about that. I just wasn't careful. I got in a little bit of a hurry there, but you can always double check yourself by looking. This line better be going up. Positive. Look at the last one. Okay, this one should have a negative slope. Why should this line here have a negative slope? Because what is it doing? Going down. Is my slope negative to check with that? Yes. So let's look at this one. How do we handle a vertical line here? Well, it's a little bit different. What axis does it cross? Does it cross the x-axis or does it cross the y-axis? X-axis. And where does it cross the x-axis at? 4. So what would my equation be? And it's going to be very simple here. It crosses the x-axis, and it crosses the x-axis at what? 4. So my equation would simply be x equals what? 4. Because it's a vertical line, right? So that means it's an x line. And where does it cross the x-axis at? Positive 4. Let's do one more of these just to make sure that we're completely understanding this concept. And then this will be the last one. So this will be the last one that we're going to look at here. Okay, so here's our line. Now, when I look at this, my slope should be positive, shouldn't it? Right? Because it's going up from left to right. Where does it cross the x-axis at? 0, 0. Right? So there's my x and my y-intercept are both 0, 0. Now, how do I get from one point to the other? If I start here, how do I get to here? What do I have to do? Well, I have to go over how many units? I'm going to go over 4 units, right? And then I'm going to have to go up how many it looks like? 4. So what would my slope then be? 4 over 4, which would then be what? 1. Now, how would I write my equation? Well, we use this form, y equals mx plus b. What's my slope? 1. Do I really need to write the 1 in front of the x? No, but I'll just do it so you'll see it's there. We'll rewrite it in a moment. And then what about the b? It's at 0. I don't really want to write it like that. It looks a lot cleaner if I just write this as y equals what? X. That's it. And I just wanted to pick that one out so you'd see how to do it. If you have the 1, we don't really write it, but it is there. And if you have a 0 on the end, we just drop it for our answer. So what's going to be our homework? Now, we covered quite a bit of material, but you'll find them to be pretty easy to go through. So we covered now a lot, but you're going to find that they're easy and quick to go through. A lot of it is just checking points, plugging values in. So our homework is 3.1. You should be able to do them all. You shouldn't have any trouble doing all of those. 3.1 is a pretty easy section to go through. You should be able to do all of 3.2. We did all of those. Okay, 3.3 was graphing, finding the slope. So you should be able to do all of those. The one you may have trouble with is 9. Okay, and if you have trouble with 9, we can go over that next time. But that one has a fraction in it. It's the only one that has a fraction. All the rest are whole numbers. So that's the only one you may really struggle with. It's the hardest. If you have trouble with it, we can talk about it next time. Now, we did 3.4. We did a lot of 3.4. And a lot of these are multiple choice. Like, look at your first question. Yeah, I made the graphs multiple choice so it'd be easier to pick out the right one. I'll even do the first one for you. If it's y equals -1, which choice do you think it would be? B. Answer B. Why would it be answer B? Right. And it crosses the y line, right? The y-axis. And where does it cross the y-axis at? Down 1 unit. So see, that one would be answer B. So 1 would be answer B. And if you look at like question 2, we did these. Find the slope and the y-intercept. Remember, we did that. That's just looking at it. It would have a slope of -6 and a y-intercept of 0, -2. So we've done a lot of these. The only ones that we have not went through are going to be 6 through 11. So 3.4, you should be able to do all of them except 6 through 11. And we'll cover 6 through 11 next class period. We just haven't had enough time to really go through those. And it builds with 3.5. So they all go together. So that's going to be your homework. No class next week. Okay, so no class next week. When we come back, we're going to finish up chapter 3, which is just that 3